Hello, welcome to Loremaster's Lair. I'm your Loremaster, here today for an look at the many deities of Golarion. This week, in the spirit of Spooky Month, we will be looking towards the deity who is the herald of the end of days. Grotus, the god of end times, deity of empty places, oblivion, and ruins. As always, let's begin by examining where you can find information on Grotus yourself. Like many of the more minor deities, Gods and Magic for 1st edition is not as helpful as the main ones, and you're most likely to find better information from the 2nd edition version. Also, Divine Mysteries is coming next month, which should also be of great help. Grotus appears as a deity in Shatterstar's 4th book, Through Doomsday's Door. Appears for full write-up, and of course is matched in the book Inner Sea Faiths. We also have information from Plain Adventures, though his divine realm is a little special. We'll get to that in just a second. Finally, one of our side tangents comes from the 3rd book of the Ruins of Azlanti Adventure Path, The Flooded Cathedral. But we also have some real-life topics today. Where does Grotus come from? The oldest beings in existence have no tales of his existence, but by the time of the Azlanti his faith was widely known. There are no records of a moral Grotus ascending to godhood, nor a nature spirit gaining powers until it became a god. With no connection to any other deity, his origins remain a mystery. Which already gives us the setup for Side Tangent 1, the part of the show where we look at the past to predict the future. To begin, we start with Grotus' faith in ancient Azlanti. At the time, the faith was much the same as you will hear later in this episode, until the Azlanti actually faced the end of the world. At that time, all worshippers fell to their knees and praised Grotus that they lived to see the end. Then, those which survived cursed their luck, now having to face a world after an apocalypse, not caused by their deity. Most committed suicide, and the faith fell dormant, until the last apocalypse became a distant memory, and more mad prophets began proclaiming the next one. Grotus, as should be mentioned, is the moon which hangs over the boneyard, the image of a skull on its surface. This is its real body, but there are some whispers of him appearing in the form of a human, old Azlanti records speaking of a tall, emaciated man in a long grey cloak, hanging down onto the floor. His skin is as grey as ash, his eyes are hollow, and his neck twists forward. But most notably is his hands and feet are always covered in soot. Grotus is the god of the end times, his duty the end of the universe, or even the multiverse. As he, the moon over the boneyard, hovers, he moves closer to the central spire one day and farther the next. Legend tells that if the moon ever collides with Raz's throne, that will be the end of days. Something his followers look forward to with bated breath. Each of Grotus' followers are mad, and many of them are mad in their own way. But there are 3 branches of the faith which mostly can communicate with their own. First are the Mouth of the Apocalypse, who believe Grotus will devour the entire universe at the end time, judging everything along the way, and therefore they live without care as the end is nigh. The Pillar of Incarnation believes instead that Grotus is the one who will begin building the next universe after this one ends, and will collect the greatest of each concept to bring to the other side. And so these worshippers work to speed along the end, so this impure prototype may make way for a better tomorrow. The sign of the Destroyer believes that Grotus is a part of nature and a sign of the coming destruction instead of its bringer. These worshippers mostly just preach that the end is near, but are known for strange behaviors like mercy killing instead of healing. Which brings us to a second side tangent. While not directly the deity of mental health, Grotus is strongly connected to madness. Madness itself being commonly used in horror. Not always fairly, mental health is a complex subject, but God, Season, and Game gives us a chance to talk about 3 different diagnoses today, with Pathfinder rules for them all, at least 1E, which we can look at and examine respectively and respectfully. Anyway, the first, and this side tangent, is mania. Mania is the abnormal elevation. Anyway, the abnormal elevation of arousal, affect, and energy. In short, the main symptom is a person has emotions heightened to difficult to manage levels and can easily swing based on outside influences. And that is all emotions. While thought of as the opposite of depression, it does enhance sadness too, and also makes one more irritable and quicker to lash out with anger. Other common symptoms of mania are being more easily distractible, feeling rested with less sleep, being more talkative while in the manic state, and more willingness to take part in high-risk activities. Speaking of high risk, the faith of Grotus. No one knows if Grotus intends people to follow him, much less have any church to him. Therefore, his priests tend to be loners, with like-minded individuals coming to them more than the priests find worshippers. Grotus has no care for what his followers do, and in turn his followers tend to have little care for their future. It is not surprising a fair number of the faithful tend to be suicidal, and the faith seeing suicide as a valid way to walk away from their madness. Worshippers of Grotus do not build anything new. Instead, their shrines and temples are built in the ruins of abandoned places of other faiths, or at least were once places where great gatherings took place. Temples tend to have holes in the roof open to the moon, and sealed portals called Doomsday's Doors, which open when the end is nigh. Shrines can also be as simple as rocks in the open, a skull mark denoting their desolate purpose. I should have drank water before this. My thoughts on it. Anyway, here is one thing unique about Grotus. His realm is himself. The skull-faced moon of Grotus, hanging in the sky above the boneyard. Those who set foot on Grotus either instantly blink out of existence, or the few seconds they spend there have their mind twisted beyond recognition. And those who try scrying on the surface are driven mad. Despite what legends people tell, or what truly will happen at the end times, Grotus has and will long be a looming presence in the sky. Which is a good time to talk about another madness for Side Tangent 3. We have psychosis. Psychosis, or more commonly called psychotic break, is not itself a mental disorder, but the result of something separate eventually causing a breakdown. Psychosis leads to a difficulty being able to distinguish what is real or not. Delusions or hallucinations are common, along with incoherent speech and behavior not appropriate for social situations. As for the cause, we have other mental illnesses, extreme sleep deprivation, or terrible reactions to drugs to blame. Or seeing things men were not meant to see, but that's left out of most medical journals. So, time for other information on Grotus' faith. First places where Grotus' worship is strongest are desolate nations, Nadal, Geb, Usulov, and the Sodlands. For holidays, all Grotus worshippers hold the last day of the year, which they call the final day, in reverence. As the year ends, they look for signs of their god to the upcoming tragedies of the year to come. As for holy text, the most we usually get is half-man fragments written by his worshippers, sometimes on sign walls, or sometimes even their own skin, which gives us what is known as the Book of the Last Moon, a compilation made by the more rational members of some of the most relevant ravings in existence, still guaranteed to give anyone who reads it nightmares. Finally, allies. Let us get the easy one out of the way. Other gods. He has no allies or relationships to other gods. Some of the cultists get along well with cultists of Ugathoa or Rovagug, but Grotus himself does not even have a relationship with Pharasma, the deity whose sky he spends all his time in. As for his planar allies, Gegnom Greg is a barb devil forever inflicted with paranoia. He wears the eyes of his victims to ensure he can see in all directions. Yerg is a nonet protean who is gray in color. While nonets usually do not have the best mental health to begin with, Yelis is even worse, to the point it occasionally narrates what it is doing, while also constantly babbling. Not the best combination. Finally, the End's voice is a cloak without legs or face, wielding a heavy flare. Often mistaken for a reaper, it appears to watch massive calamities on the planet. Now on to the final side tangent, our final form of madness, and one that I want to talk about because of its controversy. Dissociative identity disorder, or multiple personality disorder. Controversial in the fact that there is no set medical definition for what dissociative is, and this has led many to debate among experts on what actually is needed to qualify for the diagnosis of it, as well as some not even believing the disorder exists, merely someone getting into their head ideas of multiple personalities by listening to information about dissociative identity disorder. But going on to the generals, the one thing agreed on is the presence of two or more distinct personalities within one's head. The cause of this usually is trauma, especially in childhood, that interrupts neural processes of identity, causing different parts of one's identity to become distinct instead of coming together like they usually do in childhood. The other usual symptom is the separation of memory between the personalities. This is compared to what is known in the neurodivergent community as plurality, where one knows what their other personalities are doing, but feel as if they are in the back seat. And that brings us to the end of today's video. This is one maddening place to start off this month's tour. But next week, we will be looking towards another dead rock in the sky, this time within the Pact World system. See you then.